What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Court Storm College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Storm Media Network. We are your hosts, Kanaye and Josh. And on today's episode, we got to talk about a new face of the North Carolina Tar Heels basketball program, that being Mike Malone, who was just hired on the day of the national championship, Monday, April 6th. And obviously, there's a lot of talk surrounding this with how big of a job North Carolina is, arguably the best job that you'll find across college basketball as a coach. And obviously, me and Josh, we have some thoughts on this ourselves, and we're going to kind of have a just free-flowing conversation as to what we think the long-term output of this Mike Malone experiment will end up producing. But before we do that, just a couple quick messages. First, us here at the Core Storm, we partner with Phorm Energy to tell you about all the great products they have to offer. Whether you're someone who's an active gym goer or someone who just needs to stay energized throughout your daily life, Phorm has the products you need. And if you're interested in seeing more about what they have to offer, I'll be plugging the link to their full website in our description box below. And as always, be sure to engage with the videos on this channel in any way you can. Liking, subscribing, telling other people about us goes a really long way to influence the algorithm on YouTube, getting more people to see what we put out. And also be sure to turn on your post notifications so you're the first to see our latest videos. So let's get right into it. And I'll turn it to you first, Josh. What are just your immediate reactions to the announcement that Mike Malone is going to be the next coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels?
I didn't expect it. I had heard very small rumors about it, but if you had asked me 5 minutes before it happened, I would have probably chosen Scott Drew. I had heard a lot of stories about him likely going. I mean, Baylor as a program hasn't been the same since 2021, and he's still a national champion winning coach, but Baylor didn't have the money to field another team like that, so it made sense for him to go. I had also obviously heard the big rumors about Billy Donovan, but those ones really started to shrink when people realized that you couldn't really take Donovan out of a Bulls team that would be done with their season after the transfer portal even ended. And I think that was probably the biggest reason as to why he wasn't chosen. He was probably the better pickup considering his time in NCAA coaching, but this one's not bad. I'd mentioned off camera to Kanaye that a former NBA coach definitely should have been in consideration. I thought it was Tom Thibodeau. I was a big fan of him. I'm from the New York area, so I have watched a lot of his, Knicks teams, and I thought that him being fired opened up a new opportunity for him, and maybe it still does, but, Mike Malone is probably an even better option if you're going to ask me. He coached Nikola Jokic in his MVP and championship seasons, like LeBron, like Jamal Murray. Like, he has insanely good NBA experience, but I feel like the translation from NBA to college, especially when you have no college experience, really does change the narrative a lot for me. And this is kind of where I don't want to put my negativity out on this, but this is where I have some decent deliberations on this decision. I don't think that Mike Malone will find instant success the way people are going to say. I think that if they chose, Scott Drew or Mark Byington or a Nate Oates or some college coach, it would have been an instant success. But keep in mind this, the portal opened the day after. He has to still get his staff in full, and his roster right now is Henry Vazar. There's nothing left on that team. Derek Dixon, Kyan Evans, Seth Trimble, Caleb Wilson, gone. Completely gone. And while I do get that there is probably a few freshmen waiting in the wings that haven't, been factored into this yet, this is a completely new team that needs to compete with Duke. They need to compete with, a new Syracuse team, a good Miami team. The ACC is trending upward next year as it did this year. They need to be on a level where they, honestly, were this year to be competitive. And to be honest, a 6 seed would be nice for an upcoming team with Mike Malone's caliber. But, UNC is this blue blood program. They need to be a 1 seed within 2 years and a national championship within 5 to feel happy. So I think the pressure that Malone has actually will probably be similar to the one he had with the Nuggets. I mean, him not winning an NBA title, 3 years after, or within the 3 year span of him winning it in 2023, probably was the reason why he got removed from the job. And I think in a weird way, it's going to return to him that he has to win a national championship within 5 years, or else this will be a, funny story of a former champion and NBA being unable to do it in NCAA. But I think to start his career at UNC, it's not going to be as pretty as people think. simply enough.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this whole process played out because Mike Malone's candidacy for this job was really kept under wraps for the entire head coaching search by the North Carolina Athletic Department. I think the first murmur that I heard about Mike Malone being a serious candidate for this job was from Tyler Hansbrough, just maybe 3 days before this deal was finalized, a 6 years, $50 million contract that I think Mike Malone, if I got the specifics correct, is being offered here, or the one that he did sign, I should say. And I think the more you think about it, kind of makes sense. I believe he has kids that attend North Carolina or might play sports there as well. So I guess when you consider from that angle, it makes more sense. And I honestly think the ACC style of play is probably the most similar, either the ACC or the SEC, most similar to the NBA style of play, where it's more up and down. Where you see the level of higher level of athlete, you see a lot more isolation basketball being played as opposed to the very half court oriented Big East, or sometimes what we see out of the Big Ten and Big 12. And on top of that, I just think Mike Malone's personality is just really well suited for the college game. We see that from the personalities of some of the better coaches across the college game right now. Malone is super unapologetic. He's willing to tell you things the way he sees it, and he's not going to, again, go back on what he says just to appeal to someone. I think he's going to coach kids really tough. We've seen, again, it's a little different in the NBA when you have players that have their own personal trainers and, obviously go through that development of their game on their own. But I think you can't just completely discount the work he's done in allowing a coach Nikola Jokic up into being what is he, a 3-4 time MVP, an NBA champion. The work he did with Jamal Murray, just instilling confidence in him, following the several injuries that he had to go through. I think he's going to be able to recruit, and I think he's going to be able to coach kids really, really hard. As you alluded to earlier, though, as you were just speaking about this hire, I do worry that this next season upcoming for the Tar Heels is kind of just a chalk it up, toss it out year. I just think with the timetable of this whole process, that the portal open on the day we're recording this, Tuesday, April 7th, and the hire happens yesterday. You don't have a staff set in place. If I forget off the top of my head if North Carolina has a GM for basketball set in place either. And who's to say that if they do already have one, Mike Malone can just say, "Hey, I'm the guy now. I want to clear house and bring in everyone. Everyone needs to be one of my people." So who knows what kind of transpires with that? And again, just even if this hire happens a week ago, you still would have been at such a huge disadvantage, and you would have been so far behind in the transfer portal recruiting tail that even now you're even more behind. It's going to be tough to put together a team. It's going to be tough for kids to really want to go to North Carolina when they don't know what it's going to look like under Mike Malone just yet. But he should have the resources. I think one of the factors that went in behind North Carolina choosing to go with Mike Malone is just choosing a candidate that was going to bode well with the boosters, with the donors, with the alumni, because you go and get a Mark Byington as well suited for the job that both Josh and I felt he was. I just don't know that he's the level of a name that the North Carolina fan base, alumni, donors, boosters, the athletic department wanted to be able to present in an introductory press conference. Mike Malone obviously has the NBA success. He's an NBA champ, coaching up the Denver Nuggets, and obviously he's been, at home for a while now, following his firing by the Nuggets. And I think
Yeah.
there's going to be a level of motivation behind it too. Which is, the way he went out in the NBA, I think he wants to prove that he can be an elite coach at, the college level as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Where do you think that Mike Malone could win a national championship, and how many years do you think it would take?
I think Mike Malone can win a national championship at North Carolina. In terms of how long it is until we see that, say 4 years, maybe 5 years at the earliest. But I still think if he can put together teams that are earning one seeds in the NCAA tournament, making deep tournament runs into the second weekend in the Final Four, then he doesn't necessarily need to win a national championship in that 4 to 5 year timetable that I just spoke about. But I think I don't see North Carolina winning one, super soon. Granted, it is different now. We've seen, we talked about it in the Michigan national championship recap, how if you have dedicated donors, you have motivated booster programs, and you're able to put the resources together. And I know North Carolina for sure can do that. Then you can go out and get these highly touted transfers or develop guys the way Dusty May did. That's something I'm really going to be interested in. I believe Mike Malone's going to be able to do, but how good is he in developing the players he brings into the North Carolina basketball program? Because that's obviously going to be a major factor as to how successful he can be in Chapel Hill. But again, with the resources available today, shoot, it could be 2 years, it could be 3. But I think more realistically, I think the timetable is 4 to 5 years before you see a legit shot at winning a national championship.
I definitely see your point pretty well. I think the way that I'm going to view this is he can very likely win a championship in 3 years minimum. I think the resources and the portal availability is very open. If he knows how to use it, then that is
Right.
clear. I honestly don't think that it will happen like that. I'm more on the opposite side of things. I think Mike Malone starts off pretty bad. He doesn't even make the tournament in his first year, or barely does, and doesn't make anything close to like the second weekend, if you're going to ask me. But I think the rebound really starts to grow when he understands how to basically college basketball, like in simplest form. And I think a national championship in 5 years sounds about right. Like, I think it could be done earlier, but he has what, a 6 year contract? If he's not getting it done before then, he's getting fired simply enough. Let's talk about roster real quick for how, North Carolina can rebuild going into next year. They obviously are losing a few of their guys. Portal mostly, but Seth Trimble and Caleb Wilson will be gone or draft. They are bringing in two top 25 prospects in Dylan Mingo and Maximo Adams. Luka Bogovic, Jaron Stevenson, and Henry Vezar are still back. Vezar is the lone starter from this team. He averaged 17 a game, so there is some continuity there. And Bogovic and Jaron Stevenson had good appearances off the bench and were decent players. Where do you go with this team? Because the way I'm looking at it right now is I'm keeping Dylan Mingo at the one, and probably having Bogovic at the two. I don't really know where Maximo Adams will play, if he's going to be a starter or not. If he is, he's probably going to be the three or the four. And then Vezar is probably the five. I think that doesn't really change. I don't know if Stevenson should start. He averaged like 8 a game, if I'm not wrong. He's definitely under 10. So there's definitely place for him to grow, but I'm not crazy about him. Who would you pick up from the portal, or what would you do with this roster?
Yeah, I mean, to hit on the guys that you just talked about really briefly here, I honestly think this isn't the worst situation for a coach to be walking into. If these guys all stay committed to North Carolina basketball, being your possible returnees from this past season in Henry Vezar, Bogovic, and then you can keep Mingo and Maximo committed, then again, that's not a bad foundation to build off of. Now, in terms of portal targets, I think you probably need to get a wing, another one with just a little bit more experience. I worry, like you said, I don't know if Maximo starts right off the bat. He does have some good size for someone who's going to be playing out on the wing. But again, I think you need a little bit more experience to pair with, the younger Dylan Mingo. But I think your front court should obviously be pretty solid with Henry Vezar alone. You're probably looking to maybe add a four-man there. Bogovic, I could probably see playing maybe the two, the three. I think a lot of it's going to come down to depth. I think there's a real chance we see a starting lineup of Dylan Mingo, Bogovic, portal guy, wing player that you're able to get this off season, and then Henry Vezar. And I think again it's not the worst situation for a head coach to walk into for someone who's not going to be bringing any other players over from another program, which is another facet of this too. Say you got a college coach, they can obviously bring some of their players over with them, and Mike Malone does not obviously have that advantage as part of his arsenal here, coming from essentially the couch right now.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell right now, because in terms of starting lineup, you actually don't need to rebuild as much as previously thought. But if you want to push guys to the bench, or you might assume that Bogovic or Jaron Stevenson in particular leave, or maybe we get a surprise decommit from Maximo Adams, I think Mingo is pretty secure in his spot. I think you definitely go out to the portal. You go for that John Blackwell
Yeah,
talking point. That's a big one. You definitely have the money to pay for a guy like him. I think if you want more background for the four or the five, you go for Michael Hangleton. Maybe he's your backup center, or you're starting four. You get that
yeah,
big ball going that we saw that worked with Michigan this year. I think it's definitely worth on buying low on players as well. There's definitely a ton of those guys that
yeah. I
are
mean,
out there.
you want to talk buying low. I think a guy who's right in state is Cam Taylor at UNC Asheville. He's
That's a good one. Yeah.
versatile scorer out on the wing. He's got some good size for someone who's playing the three. I think that could be a great target right there. Even if he's someone who's not good enough to start for North Carolina, could definitely give you some bench production, instant offense right away in the minutes he sees. In terms of some other bigger names, Juke Harris from Wake Forest, he's going to hear from a lot of schools, and I would not be shocked if North Carolina's thrown into the mix of schools calling him this offseason. He's obviously been dynamic and impact scorer and one of the better guards we saw across the ACC this past season. I think Caden Lewis, who's obviously had his name thrown around with a lot of different schools. He is testing draft waters, but he had a productive year under Kevin Willard for Villanova this past season. And I definitely think he's a guy who could fit well. Playing in the ACC and playing in North Carolina, I think he is that type of player. I think if you're looking for some added front court depth, JP Estrella would be a great get to pair alongside Henry Vezar. I think that would just be a really tough and physical front court to roll out next year if you are Mike Malone in North Carolina. But I think, some of those guys are definitely players that I would look to target if I am you.
Yeah, I personally can't see Drew Cares transfer from
Yeah,
one rival
I
school
don't
to
think
another.
who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows on that one? He is also testing draft water, so we'll see how that
Right.
transforms for him. But I think a big one for me would be Abdi Bashir from K State. He plays the 3 and the 4 very well. He is a near 40% 3-point shooter, which I think was a very important point to make from last year's team. Kyle Evans, who was their main sharpshooter, just did not perform the way that I thought he was going to. Transferred actually as recently as yesterday. So there is a lot to say about future there in that particular spot of spot up shooting. I think this team definitely needs to focus on that, which is probably a really good point for Mike Malone in this. I mean, NBA nowadays is very heavily focused on the 3-point line and 3-point shooting. I mean, you had probably one of the best 3-point shooting centers ever, Nikola Jokic, that Mike Malone has coached, Jamal Murray, KPJ. He raised a team of guys that were very dedicated to, their 3-point shooting. I think that would definitely matter a lot if he focuses on that, because the team last year was pretty decent at 3-point shooting, but it was focused on Bazar and Wilson, who are good 2-point, paint shooting guys. And while that still is important, I think the sport has once again focused more on shooting outside the arc. And when you're competing against a team like Duke that does focus heavily on the NBA style of 3-point shooting, I think it really does matter in the long term to be competitive at that area, which, a guy like Abdi Bashir can do that. I think Drew Cares, like you said before, could do that. So I do expect UNC to get a top 25 transfer, if not 2 of them, this offseason, but it really does depend on how the pickups foresee themselves going ahead, because it really is a flipper coin situation for this upcoming year. But, in general, I wish Mike Malone the best of luck. I really like this edition, because this definitely just increases media attention, because I know how big of a deal Mike Malone was in the NBA. And I think people that were fans of him on the championship winning Nuggets are going to like to watch him have similar success, hopefully, with the Tar Heels.
Right. I mean, I've heard a lot of UNC alumni who played in the basketball program really just have nothing but good things to say about Mike Malone, if they've had personal experiences meeting him or just going off of what other people have told them about what you're getting with Mike Malone. I've only ever heard really good things about Mike Malone in the NBA circles of people who cover NBA basketball. So I think this is a good hire. I do slightly worry, do we see this kind of play out in the fashion the Kevin Young BYU experiment has played out, where you see him kind of prioritize more of an NBA style of play that it's so, all right, pick out your matchup, let a guy go one-on-one. We saw how obviously he let Jamal Murray just play freely out on the perimeter. He really let Jokic kind of do whatever he wanted. And I'm sure there's going to be a major emphasis placed on him trying to add some 3-and-D wings, which are just obviously so crucial in the NBA style of play. He's probably going to look to add those types of pieces and players to this North Carolina basketball program in the near future and in the seasons moving forward as well. So I'm just curious, do we see a situation where it kind of ends up like a Kevin Young BYU, where there's not as much of an emphasis defensively, but you just kind of let guys go one-on-one and pick out their matchups, try to just, break guys down off the dribble? Or do we kind of see play on like a Cal fashion where some, top recruits just view it as their first year in the NBA going to play for Mike Malone, and we see him start to land some of the top prospects every year out of high school?
I think it could be a mixture of both. I mean, we'll see with Mingo, considering he's a top 10 recruit, but I like the Kevin Young one. That's the thing that I was thinking about. I think that it's going to be heavily focused on building an NBA-based system, which I think does yield well for first-year freshmen who want to do the one-and-done jump. I think it definitely increases their role, and we definitely could see that going ahead in future years with freshman recruiting. That said, though, I do think there's going to be more of an emphasis maybe played on trying to adapt to college basketball. I think Mike Malone definitely wants to modify his way in, considering the way he coached was good, but it got him fired.
Right.
So I think there is a difference in that compared to another coach or, currently empower NBA coach like Billy Donovan, who probably wouldn't change his methodology that much. I do think that there will be, like I said before, the emphasis on 3-point shooting, but I think Henry Bazar is a good project for Mike
Yeah,
Malone.
he
Like if you can
is.
get him shooting threes the way that Jokic does, I mean, there's definitely a place for that too. But the 3-and-D wing is a good one. That's probably Abdi Bashir again. I mean, if there's any guy that I'm thinking about the top of my head, I could fit that in there. I definitely could see a ton of other guys fitting that role. So there's a lot to be curious about. Actually, there's so much to be curious about because this is the first time we've seen this in quite some time. Like I said, I wish him the best of luck, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to start as great as people think, but it could definitely be very, very good very, very quickly.
Yeah, again, I think you need to give him a pass on this upcoming season just because I just don't know if he's going to be ready to successfully make that jump, or I should say, adjustment to the college game immediately. So we might see North Carolina struggle. I think they can make the tournament with the players they right now have coming back and the players they have coming in. Again, as it stands right now, we got to see if these players decide, to leave or decommit following this Mike Malone hire. But nonetheless, if they can nail this transfer portal, Mike Malone can obviously get some people members on his staff that know the college game a little bit more than he does. It's definitely going to help them put together a fairly competitive on-court product which could end up in an NCAA tournament appearance. But I would not expect them to be a top 5 seed this year.
No, no,
I don't
I think
think that that'll happen.
the adjustment definitely needs to be there. I think particularly defensively, as you mentioned
Right.
before, there's gonna be that problem. But they should be a great offensive team. I do expect that.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. But again, want to wish Mike Malone a lot of luck. It is nice to see North Carolina back in the conversation of potentially being on the come up of becoming the North Carolina or getting back to becoming the North Carolina that we know them to be throughout their very illustrious history as one of the blue bloods of college basketball. But that's going to take care of everything that we had on this episode today, breaking down our thoughts on the Mike Malone hire in Chapel Hill. Again, really excited to see what we get in year one of Mike Malone there. Should be a really interesting experiment, but I think we could see it pay off several years down the line. But until the next episode, see you all next time.